A young mother of 3. Her life savagely ended with 12 vicious stab wounds and a bullet piercing her face. Her final moments a whirlwind of terror and violence. In the quiet, troubled town of Jennings, Louisiana, where secrets fester behind closed doors and trust is a luxury few can afford, a series of grisly murders would shatter the fragile calm and leave a community drowning in fear and suspicion. This is the story of the Jeff Davis 8, a haunting narrative of loss, corruption, and unanswered questions that reverberates through decades. Tonight, we peel back the layers of this dark mystery, recounting every twist and turn in a relentless pursuit of truth, even as the ghosts of the past refuse to let go. The nightmare began on a seemingly ordinary May afternoon in 2005, when a local fisherman, Jerry Jackson, set out for a quiet day on the canal. As he prepared his fishing line on a worn bridge, he noticed an odd disturbance in the water below. At first, he dismissed it as a stray mannequin, a remnant of a recent theft reported in the area. But as he drew closer, the gruesome truth became undeniable. A woman's body was entangled in the murky current, drawing a swarm of flies that feasted upon the evidence of death. In mere moments, 911 was called, and within minutes, officers from the Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office arrived. They hauled from the canal the body of 28-year-old Loretta Chasson, a sex worker known in Jennings for her troubled past and frequent run-ins with the law. Clad in blue jeans and a white blouse, with no identification to anchor her to life, Loretta's decomposing form raised more questions than answers. The autopsy would later suggest that she had been submerged for 3 days, yet no definitive cause of death, no signs of drowning, no clear injuries, and only ambiguous traces of drugs in her system could explain the grim tableau. Loretta's disappearance had not been widely reported, yet her life was interwoven with the dark undercurrents of Jennings' criminal scene. Her own brother recalled the day he last saw her at a local gas station on the 17th, where she had willingly stepped into the vehicle of a man known as Frankie Richard, a name that echoed ominously throughout the town's underworld. Frankie's reputation was as murky as the canals themselves, a man with ties to drugs, sex work, and street violence. His involvement with Loretta was the first thread in a tangled web that would soon engulf several vulnerable women. According to eyewitness accounts, Loretta was later seen at a notorious establishment called the Boudreaux Inn, a seedy motel known as much for its illicit liaisons as for its connection to a community on the brink. There, she mingled with 2 other sex workers and a man known only by the nickname Stymie, adding further layers of intrigue to an already confounding case. Despite the glaring evidence of a life cut short, authorities classified Loretta's death as undetermined, leaving many to wonder if a calculated hand had been at work behind a facade of chance. Barely a month later, the shockwaves of Loretta's mysterious end intensified with the discovery of another body in a similar watery grave. This time, the victim was identified as 30-year-old Ernestine Patterson, whose body was found in a canal not far from where Loretta had been discovered. Unlike the enigmatic presentation of Loretta's remains, Ernestine's body bore clear signs of violence, a series of deep gashes to her throat and bruises on her hands that spoke of a fierce struggle. Drugs were again found in her system, and like Loretta, Ernestine had been involved in the world of sex work and substance abuse. The brutal marks on her skin left little doubt that her death was a homicide, and the community's murmurs of a possible serial killer began to swell. Yet even as the bodies piled up, the investigation remained mired in uncertainty. Without concrete physical evidence, and with law enforcement struggling to piece together conflicting witness statements, the murders of Loretta and Ernestine remained shrouded in mystery and controversy. As the body count rose, Jennings found itself gripped by a pervasive fear. In 2007, 2 additional women were found dead in quick succession, intensifying the whispers of a serial predator stalking the night. The first of these was 21-year-old Kristen Gary Lopez, discovered nearly nude in a canal just outside town. Her body, the most decomposed of the victims so far, told a tale of neglect and a protracted journey into decay. Only days later, the 26-year-old Whitney Dubois was found off a remote road. Though Whitney's body was discovered much more quickly, the circumstances surrounding her death were equally baffling, with her manner and cause of death left undetermined. Both women had deep connections to the seedy world of sex work, and Kristen had even been interviewed by police following Loretta's demise. Their deaths reinforced the growing belief that a single malevolent force might be targeting a specific group of vulnerable women, a theory that was bolstered by the recurring involvement of Frankie Richard, who had been linked to all three cases. In the aftermath of these discoveries, the community was rife with rumor and suspicion. Eyewitnesses recounted unsettling details. On the night Kristen vanished, she was seen with Loretta's cousin, a woman named Tracy, and later at a motel where Frankie Richard resided. In a dramatic recounting that has since become the stuff of local legend, Frankie was accused of beating Kristen and dragging her into a canal, with his own niece, Hannah, implicated in holding her underwater. Tracy, whose testimony shifted over time, initially implicated both Frankie and Hannah, before retracting her statements under intense pressure from the authorities. With conflicting narratives and no hard evidence to definitively tie the suspects to the crimes, the case against them quickly crumbled. Accusations of police incompetence and corruption swirled around the investigation as several leads evaporated into thin air. The atmosphere of distrust extended well beyond the immediate circle of suspects. In Jennings, the local police and sheriff's offices had long been under scrutiny for corruption, with allegations ranging from evidence tampering to extortion. The very agencies tasked with solving the murders were themselves entangled in the criminal web they were supposed to dismantle. One particularly damning incident involved a police sergeant who, after taking statements from two women in jail, reported that a lead investigator on the case had allegedly disposed of evidence on behalf of Frankie Richard. This investigator was later found to have sold a pickup truck, rumored to have been used in Kristen's murder, for nearly double its value. And yet, despite the damning nature of the incident, he was not only allowed to continue working in the department, but was even placed in charge of the evidence room. The sergeant who attempted to expose this misconduct was promptly fired and later faced charges of malfeasance and obstruction, casting a long shadow over the integrity of the investigation and fueling public outrage. Even as law enforcement's credibility crumbled, more bodies began to surface, each adding a new layer of complexity to the case. In May 2008, a 23-year-old local known as Laconia Brown, or Muggy as she was called, was found lying on a roadside, her body marred by 7 deliberate cuts to her neck, and evidence of an attempt to obliterate traces of forensic evidence by dousing her with bleach. Muggy's case was particularly poignant, as she was not only connected to the earlier victims through shared acquaintances, but was also linked directly to the man known as Stymie, whose reputation for violence had already been whispered about in hushed tones. Her murder deepened the prevailing belief that the killings were not isolated events, but part of a larger, more sinister design that entangled both the criminal underworld and those sworn to protect the community. Amid the terror and the mounting body count, another chilling discovery sent shockwaves through Jennings on September 11, 2008. In the midst of the rural woods, a group of hunters stumbled upon the skeletal remains of 24-year-old Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno. Her body, nearly unrecognizable after prolonged exposure to the elements, was identified only after extensive DNA testing. Crystal's final moments were as enigmatic as they were tragic, a life cut short in circumstances that defied simple explanation. And if that were not enough to shake the community to its core, 17-year-old Brittany Gary, a close relative of Kristen Lopez, was reported missing shortly thereafter. Her body, found nude, and face down in the tall grass alongside a rural road further underscored the grim pattern that had come to define the Jeff Davis 8. Brittany's death, like those before her, was marked by an unsettling lack of visible trauma, leading investigators to suspect asphyxiation, yet offering few concrete clues as to who or what was responsible. As if the mounting tally of victims were not horrifying enough, the investigation began to uncover disturbing ties between the deceased and a select group of individuals who roamed the streets of Jennings with impunity. One name emerged repeatedly: Frankie Richard. Not only was he connected to Loretta, Kristen, and Whitney, but his influence extended to nearly every facet of the town's shadowy dealings. Frankie's alleged involvement in the theft, violence, and subsequent cover-ups painted him as a man who was both feared and, in some twisted way, indispensable to the local criminal ecosystem. His presence loomed over every tragedy, and though he repeatedly maintained his innocence, whispers of his complicity in the murders only grew louder with each new body discovered. Then there was Danny Berry, a deputy at the Jefferson Davis Parish Jail with a reputation as dark as the night. Danny's name surfaced in connection with Brittany Gary's death, with rumors suggesting that he not only had close contact with the young victim in the days leading up to her disappearance, but was also suspected of orchestrating a network of illicit activities. Allegations of a hidden sex dungeon within his domain, an underground lair where he allegedly exploited vulnerable individuals, added a sinister edge to an already convoluted investigation. Though Danny steadfastly denied any involvement in Brittany's death, the mere suggestion that a law enforcement officer might be complicit in such depravity only deepened the community's distrust of those meant to serve and protect. Perhaps the most perplexing figure in this tangled web was Terry Galori, the warden of the Jefferson Davis Parish Jail, and a man whose personal connections to the victims were as unsettling as they were numerous. Terry's name was linked to several of the victims. He was rumored to have been intimately involved with Loretta during one of her incarcerations, and later he emerged as a key figure when 24-year-old Crystal's skeletal remains were discovered. In an eerie echo of past events, Terry claimed that he could identify Crystal by a distinctive tattoo, knowledge that only someone who had been intimately involved with her could possess. His behavior, coupled with the revelation that all 8 victims had, at one point, provided law enforcement with information on the criminal underbelly of Jennings, suggested that Terry's influence extended far beyond the confines of the jail. Many in the community began to wonder whether the very system designed to uphold justice had, in fact, become complicit in these unspeakable crimes. Despite the mounting evidence of corruption, mismanagement, and a series of inexplicable deaths, the investigation into the Jeff Davis 8 was hampered by a litany of missteps. In 2009, a multi-agency task force was assembled, comprising local sheriff's offices, state police, the Attorney General's office, and even the FBI, in a desperate bid to put an end to the spree of murders. The task force's efforts, however, were stifled at every turn. Promising leads evaporated into thin air, crucial pieces of evidence were mishandled or deliberately obscured, and conflicting witness statements undermined any semblance of a coherent narrative. Even as the task force ordered DNA samples from every investigator in an attempt to forge new connections, the murders inexplicably ceased, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and a community left to grapple with its own collective trauma. Over time, the legends surrounding the Jeff Davis 8 grew into a tapestry of whispered conspiracies and half-truths. Some claimed that the murders were the work of a single, elusive serial killer, a predator who thrived on the chaos and vulnerability of Jennings' most marginalized citizens. Others believed that the killings were the result of multiple perpetrators, each driven by their own twisted motives and operating with near impunity under the cover of institutional corruption. The truth, however, remained as murky as the Louisiana canals where the bodies were found. With each passing year, the voices of the victims grew fainter, their stories reduced to fragments of testimony and scattered newspaper clippings, while those responsible remained shrouded in mystery. For the residents of Jennings, the legacy of the Jeff Davis 8 is more than just a series of unsolved crimes. It is a haunting reminder of the dark forces that can fester in the heart of a community. In a town where everyone knows everyone, the notion that a trusted neighbor or even a public servant could be entwined in such malevolence is both terrifying and disheartening. As new sheriffs took office and promises of renewed investigations were made, hope flickered briefly, only to be extinguished by the cold reality of systemic corruption and bureaucratic inertia. The echoes of those long silenced still reverberate through the narrow streets and shadowed alleys of Jennings, a grim testament to a past that refuses to be forgotten. The spirit of the Jeff Davis 8 will remain a somber reminder of the cost of neglect and the enduring power of truth.